Good morning. Welcome to PC Guys Off-Grid Cabin, where the show never ends. I just wanted to come to you and invite you into the cabin, have this nice steaming cup of coffee, real coffee, not that stuff you buy in the store. I'm talking about the drip coffee. You can't do drip coffee in an off-grid cabin. Off-grid cabin living requires a lot of lifestyle changes that just it's completely different. You can't just go flip a light switch on or turn on a switch on a coffee maker and expect to be able to do that, because you're running off of solar power, so you can't just up and do those things. You have to account for pretty much every watt of power that you use. So we use an old-fashioned percolator. It takes more time, but it sure makes a great cup of coffee. And it does take a while for it to cool down, because you have to boil the water in order to make it percolate. So it does come out of the pot hot. And it will scald you if you're not careful. But hey, it is great coffee. And I wanted to come to you this morning to kind of go over what exactly are we trying to accomplish here, and why an off-grid cabin? Why not just do what everybody else does? You know, hook up to the electric grid and all those sort of things. Well, it started several years ago, and I was working as a truck driver for a manufacturing company, and we made pretty good money and worked our tails off. But then as I went along in my career, I started to become disillusioned with the way things were going. It was affecting my health. It was affecting my, well, not when I say my health, it wasn't just my physical health. It was affecting my mental health too. And I woke up one day and I said, there's got to be a better way. There just has to be a better way than making some other people rich. And so I started just looking around at what can I do, and I had been wanting to find a piece of land that I could eventually retire to, and my son-in-law worked with a fella that he says, hey, he's got this piece of property that he had been talking about selling, and he hasn't advertised it or anything. He's, because he hasn't been pushing really hard to sell the place, but he does want to sell it. And he says it's not very far from where he was living at. He says, let's get over and go take a look at it. And I fell in love with it. And I'm like, I can do something with this. He told me what the man wanted for it. I'm like, I think that might be doable. Now, when you're buying a piece of land, you have to be extremely careful. The person that I attempted to buy this land from, he wanted to just draw up a contract and then go down to the courthouse and file it, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. That makes me nervous. I said, no, the only way I'm going to be willing to do this is to go through a title and abstract company and do it right where I could have title insurance. He reluctantly agreed. And so it rocked. I went in there and we signed the papers on the contract to start the ball rolling, and it rocked on about 3 weeks, and I hadn't heard back from the abstract company, and I'm like, okay, finally I called them. I said, what's going on? She says, we're having issues with your title. And it was the place that I was attempting to buy, which eventually became PC Guys-Off-Grid-Cabin property. It was 2 lots. One of the lots there was no issue with. The second lot, evidently the previous an owner had passed away, and then it was basically they had the paperwork all messed up, and they had to go contact a probate court and get documents, and it wound up rocking along about 6 weeks before they got it all straightened out. It was a mess. And had we have done this title transfer on our own by just going to the courthouse, that mess would have followed. And then if I had ever attempted to sell that lot, then, well, there you go. Then it would still be hanging out there. So, in purchasing a piece of property, whether you're doing it off-grid or whatever it is you're going to do with this piece of property, do your research and your due diligence, and make sure that you have done what it is that you need to do. Make sure you can use the property for what it is you're intending to use it for. I personally had a list of criteria that I absolutely had to have in purchasing a piece of property, and I had to take and have almost no building codes where I'm located at. The only building code I have is I do have to have a permitted septic system. That's the only permit that I need. Other than that, I can do pretty much what I want to do. That's important, because I've heard a lot of horror stories from people that wanted to do off-grid cabins, and then when it came right down to it, they either got hit with needing a building code permit for this, needing a building permit for that, or you just flat out can't do it, or it has to be put on a concrete slab, or just all sorts of stuff, depending on what state you're in, what county you're in. Do your research. Now, I also found out why it is this guy wanted to avoid the title abstract company. It's because he had a little something to hide in his own self, in that he had been sued by someone, either that here or his wife had, because they were both on the deed. And I would assume it was probably involving a traffic accident or something along those lines, because it wasn't a huge amount of money. It was like $600. But when they sold this property, the title abstract company said, hey, you've got this judgment hanging on you. We're going to have to take that money from you. And that's exactly what they did. So whoever it was that sued the previous owners, they got their money. Because title abstract company takes the money, they send it to the court of jurisdiction, and the court of jurisdiction pays the plaintiffs. So the guy didn't really want to pay the money. I would imagine that if it was a large sum of money, then he probably wouldn't have even sold the property. You know, if you're selling a 4.5 acres of property, and you've got a court that seize 3/4 of your proceeds, then you're probably not going to sell that property like that. But you're only in delaying the inevitable, because they're going to get their money. So I bought the property and got out here, and then it was time to clean up. The previous owner had hauled in some hesitate to call it dirt, but they were at one point wanting to build a house out here, and so they leveled it off a space here and filled it in so that they could build on it. The problem involved what they leveled it off with was caliche. Now, if you're viewing this and caliche's only prevalent in some places, a lot of people never even heard of caliche. Caliche is nasty stuff. When it's dry, it's hard as concrete. When it's wet, it turns into a slush that sticks to everything. It's slick. And it takes forever to dry. And virtually, grass can virtually not grow, hardly grow in this stuff. It's just terrible. So, we're going to have to do something with that. And so during spring break, I'm going to probably have a dump truck bring me about 16 yards of topsoil so we can dump it on top of this caliche, cover it up to where maybe we can get some grass to actually grow on it. I don't know what to do with that other than come in here with a tractor and try to drag a bunch of it out of here. That would be a very labor intensive project. It's something I just don't particularly want to try. Oh, that's good coffee. So we located our cabin out here and started setting things up, and it was a slow process. I was still working for the trucking company and doing that, and I realized that finding employment up here near the cabin was going to be somewhat difficult, because that's probably why the land was relatively affordable. It's a very rural county, and your prospects of finding employment, unless you take and travel 25-30 miles from here, then and even then the prospects aren't real good. And I did something, so I wound up, I finally figured out what it is I could probably do within my qualifications and skill sets. And I did something that, well, it's going to be a challenge, just to say the least. Took a job driving a school bus. Now, was I qualified to do it after driving 18-wheelers for years? Yeah, I was very qualified to do that. But I can tell you this, it's a challenge. Now I took a job with local school district near where my permanent home is, kind of as a get your foot in the door type of thing. Go out, learn the ropes, learn the ins and outs of how that works. And then when I get far enough along into the cabin to move here full time, then it's going to be significantly easier to get your foot in the door with one of these school districts near where the cabin is. There's like 4 or 5 different school districts around here to take a look at. And as I understand it, every school district's needing school bus drivers. Now I thought that for the most part that would be easy. It's not. Respect your local school bus driver. They have a tougher job than you think they do. You get 60 screaming kids on a bus. You're trying to make sure they all get to where they're going safely. Little Johnny hit little Susie. You're trying to drive and figure out where it is you need to be, and it's tough. I'm up for a challenge, but